Welcome back to J-Thunda's Music Reviews, and in today's video, we're going to be ranking every Pink Floyd studio album. And if you don't know, Pink Floyd is one of my all-time favorite bands. They're actually my third favorite band of all time, just behind Led Zeppelin, which I've already done a ranking albums list already, so I'll link that down below. And Steely Dan is my second favorite, and I will eventually get to their albums as well. But like I said, for today's video, we're going to be ranking every Pink Floyd studio album. And to my count, there are 15 that I'm going to count here. And yeah, I'm going to try not to spend too much time on like the lower ranked albums because these are the albums I tend to revisit the least amount of times. I still like all of these albums, but like really it's like the top 7 or top 8 that are like really just some of my all-time favorite albums, including my all-time favorite album, which you might be able to guess. I don't know, but it's going to be a lot of fun to check out these albums. So yeah, what are your favorite Pink Floyd albums? Comment that down below, and also, what do you think is in my top 5 before we get to them? So yeah, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So coming in at number 15, definitely my least favorite Pink Floyd album, and definitely the one that I revisit the least amount of times. It's not a bad album per se, but it's definitely not my favorite by them. And that would be The Final Cut. And I believe this came out in 1983, a few years after their huge success of The Wall. This album is definitely more of like a Roger Waters experiment. Roger Waters album, like his fingerprints are all over this. It's a little different than the rest of their catalog, I would say. And the theme of like war is just like laden throughout this album. And it's good. Like it does have some good songs on it. When the Tigers Broke Free, The Gunner's Dream, the Fletcher Memorial Home, and then probably my favorite on the album is the closer of Two Suns in the Sunset. But overall, it's just not an album that I love to return to. It's definitely my least listened to Pink Floyd album. I mean, maybe it would grow on time, like after re-listens, but you know, every time I listen to it, I just don't get too much out of it. So that's why it's, you know, lower on the list. So yeah, The Final Cut, number 15. And coming in at number 14, this is definitely cited as usually their worst album. But for me, it's got some fun stuff on it. Yeah, it's Guma at number 14. This is a very strange album. I think this is their third or fourth album. I'm pretty sure the double album too, because it's got a lot of stuff on it. It's the first half is kind of like a live album, and then the second half is just like each band member just decided to make the weirdest song possible. And that's kind of my love for this album, is just kind of like that second half, because they're just so weird. I'm not gonna say that they're all good, but they're fun to listen to. Probably my favorite is the song with like the huge title. Several species of small furry animals gathered together in a cave and grooving with a pict. That song is just so dumb, but it's so much fun. And then, you know, the rest, like Sisyphus, I can't even pronounce some of this. Grantchester Meadows, The Narrow Way, The Grand Vizier's Garden Party. Like, a lot of this is just super weird, super, what's the word, avant-garde. And then, you know, the first half of the album is pretty cool because you've got live versions of Astronomy Domine, Careful with That Axe, Eugene, Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun, which is one of my personal favorites, and A Saucer Full of Secrets. So it is definitely, I don't come back to this album a lot just because it's so weird. But yeah, I do revisit it more actually than Final Cut. But yeah, that comes in at number 14, Guma. And coming in at number 13, we have their third album, which probably came out in, what, like 1969, just before Guma, and that would be More. And I believe, actually, this is a soundtrack to, like, a random French movie or something that I've never seen, never heard of. But this one, you know, again, I don't come back to it a lot. There are certain songs that I come back to a lot, just not the whole album. Like, it's got cool songs. It's got Cirrus Minor, the Nile song, which is kind of like a really heavy Pink Floyd song, which they don't normally do. You've got probably my favorite deep cut of theirs from this album, and just one of my favorite deep cuts by them in general, Cymbeline, really cool song. Uh, and then other than that, you've got like random instrumentals and just random bits here and there. Like I said, it's not an album that I come back to a lot, but there are certain songs on it that I really enjoy and that are actually some of my favorites. So, yeah, number 13, we have More. And then this next pick might be a bit controversial. I'm sure people would put it higher on the list. But for me, number 12, I'm going to go with The Pipers at the Gates of Dawn. And this is, of course, their debut album from 1967. And of course, a lot of these songs are, very of the time, and they're very quirky and they're very weird, very psychedelic. And of course, you've got the huge, almost 10-minute song Interstellar Overdrive, very psychedelic. But then you've got, probably my favorite song on here is Astronomy Domine, or maybe The Gnome, and then also Bike. A lot of these are just very silly. Take Up Thy Stethoscope and Walk, Matilda Mother. So it's, it is a fun album, but again, it's not one that I come back to a lot. I will occasionally, but some of these songs are just so weird and out there and silly. It's not really like the Pink Floyd that I love, which, a lot of it's from the 70s, but we'll get to that eventually in the list. But yeah, it's still a fun album. I do definitely come back to it more than the previous albums I just mentioned, but I still don't revisit it a lot. It's still, a fantastic debut album, but overall not good enough to make my top 10 here. So yeah, we've got Pipers at the Gates of Dawn at number 12. And number 11 on the list, just missing my top 10. This was originally their last studio album for a long time, which came out in 1994. Of course, I'm talking about The Division Bell. And this is, years after Roger Waters left the band and David Gilmour is basically running the band. And yeah, it's Pink Floyd definitely at their most mellow sounding, and it's kind of weird that this album came out in 1994 because, like I said, a lot of their best stuff really for me is the 70s, but I still really like this album. Probably, what are my favorites on this album? You've got Marooned, which is really good. What Do You Want From Me? Keep Talking might be my favorite on this album. And then it ends, of course, with the 8.5-minute epic High Hopes, which was played a lot in concerts, I believe. You also got Cluster One. Like, basically all of these songs are good. It's definitely an album that I can listen to from start to finish. And I should have probably prefaced this whole video by saying that I'm definitely an album guy. I love to listen to albums from start to finish. And most of Pink Floyd's albums I can listen to from start to finish and have a really good time with them. And this is no exception. Like, there's no bad songs on here, and I really like it. So yeah, for those reasons, I'm going to put it at number 11. And kind of in that same vein as The Division Bell, this album came out a few years, actually not a few, 7 years before The Division Bell, and that would be A Momentary Lapse of Reason. Number 10 on the list, just making it into my top 10 here. Very similar sound to The Division Bell. Again, you've got Roger Waters leaving the band and David Gilmour running the ship here. And these albums are very similar. Like, I sometimes have a hard time remembering which songs are on which album because they're very similar sounding. Again, very mellow, but also very 80s at the same time. Kind of a weird mash. But yeah, it's got some really good songs. You've got the big hit of Learning to Fly, which is a fantastic song. But you also have The Dogs of War. You have One Slip. Maybe my favorite on here, On the Turning Away. Really good one. Terminal Frost, which I believe is their instrumental on here. Really good. And then again, you end with the 8.5-minute epic of Sorrow. Really cool stuff. And then you've got some, instrumentals here. Yeah. But yeah, it's pretty similar to The Division Bell. I kind of flip back and forth between which one I like more, but I think overall this one definitely has songs that I would put higher up on my list of like favorite Pink Floyd songs, so that's why it gets the slight edge here. But yeah, A Momentary Lapse of Reason comes at number 10 on the list. And this is where I'm going to start to make some enemies here, because I know a lot of people cite this as their favorite Pink Floyd album, one of their favorite albums of all time. I think it's overrated. It is still a great album, a double album, And that would, of course, be The Wall. Now, why do I think this is overrated? It of course has some fantastic songs. Obviously, you've got Another Brick in the Wall. You've got Goodbye Blue Sky. You've got Young Lust. You've got Hey You. You've got Comfortably Numb. You've got Run Like Hell. So you've got classic Pink Floyd songs that are concert staples, radio staples, some of their best songs of all time. But there's a lot of songs that I don't like on here. And it's very different from, like I've said, it's very different from what they used to do. And that's kind of why I like Pink Floyd, honestly, is because with every album they're trying new stuff. Like, they're not just regurgitating the same thing over and over again. So I do appreciate that. But for this one, like I said, very different. A lot of their albums really only have like 5 or 6 songs, and sometimes they have like a real epic song and a lot of longer songs. This one is a double album. It has 26 songs. Some of them are just very short, and some of them really, for me, just feel unnecessary. This album just feels a bit bloated at times, and really, like, a lot of the songs I'm just not a big fan of. You know, like, it is still a fun album to listen to, don't get me wrong, but I still think it's overrated. I get why people love it so much and they cite it as their favorite Pink Floyd album, but for me, there's just so many better Pink Floyd albums. It might be a bit, you know, crazy for me to rank it number 9 on the list here. I'm sure people are going to heavily disagree with me, but that's just how I feel. And definitely you can blast me in the comments if you want to, but, you know. So The Wall, you know, it does have some fantastic songs. A lot of them I would probably put in my top 15 and top 10 Pink Floyd songs. But as an album, it's just not one of my favorites. So number 9 is The Wall. And if you're still watching, hopefully you can get past that, because that's just, you know, my opinion. But number 8 on the list, we have The Endless River. And you're probably thinking, why are you putting this above The Wall? I really like The Endless River, mainly because, you know, I'm a big fan of instrumental albums. So when I heard about this new album, and this is their latest studio album, their last studio album as of now, I'm pretty sure there's not going to be another one. But this one came out in 2014. I was in college, and of course by that time, Pink Floyd was already one of my favorite bands. And hearing about this album and then finally getting to listen to it and realizing that it's mostly instrumental, a lot of this is stuff that they had previously recorded back in sessions like in the 80s and the 90s. They kind of took all that and made like a really just interesting and fun, very relaxing and mellow instrumental album. I love instrumental albums, so it's no surprise as to why this is higher up on the list than probably a lot of people would put it. You know, it's just a really fun album. Like, it's how long is this album? It's like it's more than an hour. It's just really relaxing. Like, I remember I was in college, I would just put this album on and just snooze and just relax. But it also has some really cool songs on it. You've got Louder Than Words, which actually one of the few songs that has lyrics on here. The last song is Nirvana, which is just really rocking, really cool. But other than that, it's just a really good flow of instrumental songs. So I love this album, and I put it at number 8 on the list, The Endless River. And number 7 on the list, we have, in my opinion, one of their more underrated albums, and that would be Obscured by Clouds. And this is the album that they released just before The Dark Side of the Moon, which obviously, you know, led them into the stratosphere of popularity in music. But this album is still really cool. It's got the instrumental of Obscured by Clouds, one of my personal favorites by them. You've got Burning Bridges. You've got What's the Deal, Mudmen, Childhood's End, Free 4, and then it ends with Absolutely Curtain. So it's just kind of a random assortment of songs, and yeah, I really like it. It's classic 70s Pink Floyd. And again, it's underrated. Not a lot of people have probably listened to this album in its entirety, but it's definitely worth checking out if you want to check out classic 70s Pink Floyd. So yeah, definitely check this out. It's one of my favorites, and it comes in at number 7 on the list. And number 6 on the list, we have Atom Heart Mother. And I know this album can be kind of divisive. Some Pink Floyd fans really like it. They put it, high up on their list. Others are like, it's not that good. They put it a little bit lower. I really like it. Again, you're going to notice a trend with like my favorite Pink Floyd albums. A lot of them are from the 70s. I don't know what it is, but like their 70s sound just is to my taste. And of course, this album starts with the 23-minute epic of Adam Heartmother. It's really good. I think one of the members of Pink Floyd said that it's really not that good, and they kind of just made this song because like Pink Floyd fans would just listen to anything, which might be true, but it's still really fun. It's really quirky. It's super epic. It's got some weird moments in it, but overall, it's just a really fun experience. And then the rest of the album, like the next few songs are just really short and just really mellow. You've got If, you've got Summer 68, you got Fat Old Son, which is really good. And then it ends with Alan's Psychedelic Breakfast, which it's just kind of like a random medley of like a guy making breakfast. Like you can hear the sounds of it, and then it intermingles with some instrumental music. It's really kind of weird, but it's really fun and really mellow. But yeah, this album is really fun. I know a lot of people wouldn't probably put it this high on the list, but it's definitely one of my favorites. So for number 6, we have Adam Heartmother. So now we're cracking into my top 5 here. And this is actually the only album that's in my top 5 that's not from the 70s. It's actually from the 60s. And that would, of course, be A Saucer Full of Secrets by Pink Floyd. Duh. This album came out in 1968. This is actually their sophomore effort, which I actually like quite a bit more than their debut album, Pipers at the Gates of Dawn. I think it kind of takes that psychedelic sound, focuses it a bit more, and this is just one of my favorite Pink Floyd albums. It has one of my all-time favorite Pink Floyd songs, probably like a top 5 Pink Floyd song, Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun. Such a mellow, doom and gloom, just, I don't know, it's just a perfect mishmash of Pink Floyd for me. I love it. But it also starts with Let There Be More Light and Remember a Day, which are fantastic songs. And then you get a little bit silly with Corporal Clegg. I love this song. Probably a lot of Pink Floyd. I don't know how Pink Floyd. Well, do you like Corporal Clegg? If you haven't listened to it, go listen to it right now and tell me what you think of it, because I really like it. And you've also got the epic Saucer Full of Secrets, which is definitely one of their better psychedelic songs. Sometimes they can go either way. Like their really long epic songs can maybe meander a little bit, but this one is fantastic. Very weird. It's got some really cool drum stuff from Nick Mason, one of my all-time favorite drummers, so definitely check it out. And then you've got Seesaw, and then you end with Jug Band Blues, which is kind of like an ending nod to, one of their founding members, Syd Barrett. This is kind of like the period where David Gilmour is taking over Syd Barrett, because Syd Barrett's starting to lose his mind a little bit. But yeah, it's kind of a perfect mash of like Syd and David Gilmour, really, with this album. But yeah, fantastic album. Very much underrated. Maybe one of their most underrated albums. I don't know. You tell me what their most underrated album is. But I love this album. And it comes in at number 5 on the list, Saucer Full of Secrets. And coming in at number 4 on the list, we have their 1975 album, Wish You Were Here. Love this album. It, of course, starts out with part 1 of Shine On You Crazy Diamond, which is epic. And then, obviously, it ends with the second part, Shine On You Crazy Diamond. So it's like split into 9 parts. So the first one is parts 1 through 5, 13 and a half minutes. And then part 5, which ends the album, or no, part 2. I don't know, but Shine On You Crazy Diamond is just one of the better epic Pink Floyd songs. Sometimes I just like to listen to it all in one go, so like part 1 and then part 2, combine them. Other times I'll just listen to the whole album and get the album experience, which of course, I'm an album guy. But it also has, some hits on here. Have a Cigar, which is a lot of fun, and then Wish You Were Here, definitely a top 5 Pink Floyd song for me. And personally, and then you've also got Welcome to the Machine, which is a really fun deep cut. So overall, really good album. I know a lot of people would put it maybe a little bit higher, like their 2 or 3rd spot. But for me, it comes in at the number 4 spot. I love this album. And yeah, Wish You Were Here, fantastic album. And now we're cracking into the top 3 here, folks. Like, these albums are just pretty much perfect in my mind. I love these albums so much. They're definitely my top 3 Pink Floyd albums. Like, the rest of this list, you know, is a little bit harder to make, but like the top 3 are like set in stone. Yeah, I love these albums. But number 3, we have Animals from 1977. I know a lot of like true Pink Floyd fans will cite this as their best album because a lot of people will have picked, you know, Dark Side of the Moon, or they'll pick The Wall or Wish You Were Here. But a lot of people, like true Pink Floyd fans, are like, no, this is their best album. And I completely agree. I love this album, but for me personally, it's their 3rd best. And of course starts out with Pigs on the Wing, which is just a little 1.5 minute acoustic thing. And then it leads into one of their more epic long songs, definitely a top 10 for me, Dogs. Love this song. And of course this whole album has the theme of animals. So you've got Pigs on the Wing 1, and then you got Dogs, fantastic. And then it leads right into Pigs, another 10-minute epic song. Really like this album, or to really like this song too. And then you've got Sheep, which I think of the 3 like main songs in the middle might be my least favorite. Dogs is my favorite, and then Pigs is right behind it. And then Sheep is still, I mean, the whole album is just fantastic. But Dogs is definitely my favorite. And then of course it ends with Pigs on the Wing 2, which is just another acoustic 1.5 minute song to end it all. It's a perfect album. I love listening to it from start to finish. But yeah, it comes in at number 3. But it is a perfect album. And coming in at number 2, this might surprise some people, but I really like this album. I would say it's one of their most underrated albums. And actually the reason why it's so high, not only just because I think it's a perfect album, but it actually has my 2 favorite Pink Floyd songs of all time. I'm of course talking about Metal, which came out in 1971. And if you're curious about what my 2 favorite Pink Floyd songs of all time are, it starts out with One of These Days, which is just a really fun instrumental song. I love the build up to it because you start out, it's just like some wind blowing, and then you got the bass boom, 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 and then like halfway through it just like explodes into this really awesome instrumental breakdown. So yeah, I love that start. And then probably my favorite Pink Floyd song of all time, Echoes. 23-minute epic song. It's just so good. If you haven't listened to it, just experience it. Go on a journey. It's awesome. And then everything in the middle, I know people probably don't like the middle stuff here. A lot of people like the first and the last song on this album. It's everything in the middle. It's kind of a weird mishmash because you've got like the epicness of One of These Days, and then it transitions beautifully into A Pillow of Winds, which is just one of the most mellow songs you'll ever hear. And then you got Fearless, which is a pretty fun deep cut. And then San Tropez, just kind of a weird like jazzy thing from Pink Floyd. Really fun. And then Seamus is just a little 2-minute song, acoustic song with like a dog named Seamus howling in the background. I love it. And then just the contrast of like listening to those songs before you get to the epicness of Echoes, I really like that what's the word, dichotomy. But yeah, it's a really fun album. It's definitely my 2nd favorite. So yeah, Metal comes in at number 2 on the list. And of course, you know what's coming. Number 1, we can just jump right into it. Dark Side of the Moon. What, was there any doubt? Yes. This is definitely my favorite Pink Floyd album. You know, I know a lot of people, people walk around all the time wearing Pink Floyd shirts, Dark Side of the Moon. Probably most of them have never even heard of this album. They're just like, ooh, that's a cool t-shirt. But for me, the first time I listened to this album, I just had to keep listening to it and listening to it. It's definitely one of my most listened to albums of all time. I can just listen to this album and it'll take me away. And I know like the stereotype of like, oh, you can really only listen to Pink Floyd if you're high. I've never been high. I love this album anyway. It's so cool. It's definitely one of the best sounding albums of all time. Of course, let me go to the songs here. You start out with Speak to Me and Breathe in the Air, and then you transition into On the Run, and then of course you go into Time, which, one of my favorite Pink Floyd songs, and then Great Gig in the Sky with, like the female singer just going nuts, really fun song, and then Money, another one of my favorites, Us and Them, Any Color You Like, and then definitely one of the best album closers of Brain Damage, Eclipse. Yeah, perfect album. Actually, my second favorite album of all time. The only one that I do like more is Led Zeppelin 4, which, my favorite band of all time has my favorite album of all time. But Dark Side of the Moon, man, you can't really get much better than that. And it is my favorite Pink Floyd album of all time. All right, so that is my ranking for every Pink Floyd studio album. And just to recap, we have last place at number 15, The Final Cut, and then 14, Umaguma, 13, More, 12, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, 11, The Division Bell, and then in our top 10, A Momentary Lapse of Reason, number 9, The Wall, which I know might surprise some people, but that's just how I feel. Number 8, The Endless River, number 7, Obscured by Clouds, number 6, Adam Heartmother, and then in our top 5, at number 5, Saucer Full of Secrets. Number 4, Wish You Were Here. Number 3, Animals. Number 2, Metal. And then, of course, number 1, my all-time favorite Pink Floyd album, Dark Side of the Moon. So yeah, that's my list. Let me know what you think of my top 15, my ranking of Pink Floyd albums. What is your ranking? What are your least favorite and favorite Pink Floyd albums? I want to know all of that down in the comments below. And thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe and all that jazz, and I'll see you in the next one. I'll probably try to do my ranking of Steely Dan albums relatively soon. But yeah, these are my favorite Pink Floyd albums. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.